The 1998 horror film Ringu, directed by Hideo Nakata, is one of the most culturally dominant examples of the J-horror subgenre, a genre commonly characterized by a synthesis between ghostly and demonic powers and modern technological functions. Sadako, the film's central supernatural menace, is emblematic of traditional supernaturality, embodying aesthetic signifiers of Japanese folk horror. However, her supernaturality is captured by the digital in the form of the iconic, mysterious videotape. The resulting tension is indicative of the role of mythology in the modern post-industrial landscape. Paranormality is no longer tethered to the otherness of the natural world, but now originates from within human structures. The rise of the Gothic brought with it the prevalence of haunted houses, architectural structures that generate or facilitate paranormality. Ringu is representative of a modern cultural shift in which digital landscapes, our most insular and abstract ecosystem yet, have become the originating point of the collective dread that mythology has always been manifested for. However, Ringu does not simply act as a transitory object between these different eras of mythology and cultural supernaturality. It clashes the natural and technological sides of its imagery against each other, and while ultimately cedes power to the digital form as the new medium of mythology, it does not do so without demonstrating its innate instability as a cultural medium. Murray Leeder, in his essay Contemporary Ghosts, writes about the relationship between ghosts and technology in Ringu as a mediated phenomenon. He observes that Sadako is an onryo, one of the traditional vengeful female ghosts of Japanese folklore, and shares their traditional look, white burial garb, white bloodless skin, and long black hair, but also she is a figure of electronic media, her soul trapped on a cursed videotape, who contacts her victims by phone and ultimately emerges from television screens to claim them. The notion that Sadako only partially exists, positioned somewhere in the blurring of media landscapes and the perceptible world, is representative of a temporal conflict in which the past itself attempts to re-emerge through the mechanisms of the present. This is the function of the ghost in a digital landscape, an expression of lost or suppressed or absent history that compromises its form to retain agency. This act of re-emergence is best exemplified by the visual conflict of technological natural images. The opening credits crawl out over a long shot of dark and foamy ocean water, rippling in the night. From this moment, water is established as a visual motif that will saturate the rest of the film, particularly significant in Shizuku's reported fascination with the ocean, the cursed video's hidden rhyme, frolic and brine, goblins we dine, and Sadako's entombment in the well. In Katarzyna and Ancuta's essay on Ringu and the technology of chaos, she writes that these instances hint at Sadako's unspecified links to the world of water demons. If we were to suppose that Shizuku and Sadako's powers are aligned with oceanic mythologies concerning local demons that lurk beneath the surface, then the transference of her soul into the videotape is necessarily incomplete. The world of water demons that she was connected to must still exist in some form and retain some agency, even if Sadako has been cut off and transformed into something else. Another hint of this dynamic is the enigmatic figure with a towel draped over its head from the cursed video. In Valerie Wee's comparative essay between the cursed videos of Ringu and Gore Verbinski's American adaptation, she writes that this figure is indicative of Ringu's attempt to look past the physical world and consider what may exist beyond. She writes that this image cannot be understood from a rational or logical perspective, and that it recalls the Nihonga, a particular form of traditional Japanese prints and paintings where space is deliberately flattened out. In the image, the man, in medium shot, appears to be standing with the sea in the background, yet the relatively large details of the waves and ripples in the water suggest that the sea in the background is actually nearer to the camera than the man pictured in the foreground. Furthermore, there is no horizon in the image, thus suggesting that the position and angle of the camera in relation to the man are different from the position and angle of the camera in relation to the sea in the background. Wee writes about this figure through the lens of Buddhism and defines a general dichotomy of cultural ideology between Japanese and Hollywood cinema. However, I believe that building off Ancuta's observations, Wee's analysis can be extrapolated to a higher degree of specificity. The figure's lack of obvious connection to Sadako and its overt pairing with the ocean signals its status as a third-party entity. Furthermore, the fact that it whispers the rhyme that prompts Reiko and Ryuji in the right direction, that it appears to Reiko in her sleep and wakes her up in time to discover that her son has watched the cursed video, and that it appears in the reflection of Ryuji's television set and points Reiko to the DVD copy all indicate that it is, in some way, subversive to Sadako's videotape. The figure's externalization itself complicates Mitsuyo Wada-Marciano's chapter, New Media's Impact on Contemporary Japanese Horror Cinema, in which she discusses the technological virality of Sadako's curse, and notices that Ringu carefully overlaps the frame of the television screen with that of the film itself when it displays the sequence of the cursed videotape. The gaze of the character in the film thus completely overlaps with the camera's gaze, and then the audience's as well, and thus becomes the perfect identification between the victim and the film's spectators. The whole scheme is to create the illusion that the film itself is the medium to transmit the curse. The sense of personal involvement that the film instills the viewer with, through this alignment of gazes, is destabilized by the figure, who seems to constantly deny both the character's gazes as well as our own. In fact, the film implicates our own role as an external voyeur, just as much as it aligns our gaze with Reiko's. One of the strangest shots in the film occurs when Reiko's son explores Tomoko's room where her body was found. He is lured in by the presence of the television, and eventually coerced by something appearing as Tomoko into watching the tape. But before he even reaches the room, he passes by a long dark hallway from which the camera is situated. He stops and turns to stare down the hallway at the camera before moving on. The next day, when Reiko investigates Tomoko's room, she passes by the same hallway with the same shot composition, and she stops walking and looks down the hallway at the camera in the exact same fashion. The hallway is entirely separate from Sadako and the television, and yet they still identify an ominous power within it. They feel our gaze through the camera as a tangible, mythologized presence beyond what Sadako represents. The towel-shrouded figure, as an extension of the ocean, not only points them in the right direction toward the Itsu Peninsula, but also allows them safe passage back over the water. Shizuku's cousin even tells Ryuji that he expected Sadako to use the typhoon to drown him, but instead, they travel safely and swiftly through the storm. Finally, the act of emptying the well to find Sadako's body and end the curse is the ultimate expression of folkloric tradition, ritualized into a method of dispelling this ancient supernatural force's intrusion upon the digital era. However, it doesn't work. It fails, and Sadako emerges from the television screen to kill Ryuji. The towel-shrouded figure then appears to Reiko in the blank reflection of Ryuji's television screen and points to the copy of the DVD, causing her to realize that the only way to beat the curse is to copy the DVD and spread it onto someone else. The supernatural intrusion is now so complete that its very mechanisms of existence and propagation are digitalized. Joseph Crawford writes about how this virality is a natural digital extension of modern Gothic themes, in which alienated young people use online technology to communicate not with each other, but with dangerous supernatural forces which use them as vectors for their own viral proliferation, which prefigures the very similar setups used in many subsequent works of online horror fiction. Crawford's observation that the digital virality that films such as Ringu and Pulse present as invading forces infiltrating and expanding into our digital culture has literally occurred with the sheer magnitude of these forms of stories in internet horror spaces. The towel-shrouded figure, as a representative icon of the traditional and natural form of supernaturality, heralds in the change as the supernatural has entered a new digital landscape, rendering its own mythology mimetic. Though, its frequent subversion of Sadako and continued agency as a third party demonstrates that the old natural powers persist. As Sadako drives to her father's house to pass the curse along, the final shot shows her driving down a road swallowed by natural structures. A forest surrounds her on either side, and tall mountains loom in the horizon. Dark clouds roll in over the sky, the exact same type of clouds that had preceded the typhoon from earlier in the film. The digital landscape is a vast and chaotic medium that currently houses the modern Gothic. But as an artificial product of human existence, it is an expansion of something that was already there, and something that will always threaten to reassert itself as a cultural force. Its power dormant, but ever present.